6 o'clock. The video that we were unable to hear or see earlier, we're going to see that.
I think
So,
there are a couple of videos.
yes,
There's
from
three
SCP, okay.
videos, and is there anyone that wants to set the videos up? I don't remember who was in charge of which video.
There were students from SCPA. We'll just watch
Okay.
them.
You guys, we'll play a matching game, see if you can tell which LCAP goal this video is connected to. We'll test you.
How have you built a classroom culture where student voice is valued, where students feel respected, and that they feel successful as a learner?
So coming here was a big change for the math department because it's an art school. Kids don't think they need the academics and they're scared of it. And so building that self-esteem, doing lots of growth and fixed mindset activities, being able to ask questions and turn it into almost like a seminar class is what I've worked the whole year to. So we're doing a lot of talking and questions. We do lots of group stuff where they have to problem solve, which has been super, super difficult because they just want to shut down. I don't get it. I don't want to talk about it. And so building that self-esteem and, getting them to problem solve and see that they can do the math and they can achieve. And so I'm super, super proud with the juniors because we're doing really high level math and they never thought they could do it. And so they're seeing the success and they're being empowered as learners and they come in. And so I think it's working. Next year will be even better, but we've had a good start.
So how do you foster that as a teacher and the design of your lessons and, in terms of like lesson delivery and your practice, what are some of the things or considerations you take as you're creating learning experiences for your students?
So I'm all about the math practice standards and showing them how math is connected to other things. We do a lot of real life stuff. I have the kids talk about, oh my gosh, we're doing this in science. Oh my gosh, we did this in music, and trying to relate that. We've done some art stuff. Also showing them that asking questions does not mean you're stupid. It means that you're a learner and really changing their mindset about what it is to learn and explaining and going through a lot of team building stuff to show them that learning is social. It's social. It's a community. It's not lecture based. It's not me telling. It's you asking questions and then us discussing. And the frustration and the mistakes are the best part of the learning. And so how do we do that? So it took a while, but once they realized it wasn't about the answers. It was about how did we get the answer and what were all the things we discussed that might be misconceptions to clarify the right path, even though there's lots of different ways to get the answer. So I've really been working hard on that. And so in my classes in the beginning of the year, there was no talking. And they're like, you just tell us. I'm like, well, that's not how it works. I already know how to do it. I need you to tell me, like, where do we start, and just being available. They know they can come in. They know, if they have questions, they can ask me during class. So my lessons are designed with, I guess, what people would consider breaks. So like I do a concept and then we have a discussion about it and then they work on something. And then I might do another level harder and we have a conversation and then they work. So I'm never talking more than 10, 15 minutes before they're actually doing something. So is that good for the lessons? Okay.
Perfect. Oh my
Are these some of the videos that are on that website that you created? What's the website called again? Okay, safe, wanted, and successful, and it's the idea of how we're marrying this, so we have testimony and examples constantly being loaded onto that site. You're just getting a peek at them, but it's teacher testimonials. Okay. It's a beautiful website, actually. It's pretty inspiring. Okay. Thank you for the context, Wendy, and Noemi, appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us in our class, and thank you, Ms. Burrows. So my name is Dr. Rankber, and this is my partner, Ms. Bustani. And we're actually going to schools all over the district, and we're looking at what makes students feel successful at their school, what makes you feel safe and included. And one of the things, as we were walking around this room, the conversations, what we were listening and looking for was your conversations around math. And I was looking at your social and your language purpose up on the board. And even when Ms. Burrows wasn't in the room, you were helping each other and thinking through your math and working together. So we just wanted to know if you would be willing to share with us, what is it about this school or this class that makes you feel successful as a student?
Miss Burrow, she breaks down everything for us, and I feel like she helps us with, like, before we try to take our test, we get to make foldables just to refresh our brain, and she makes sure that everyone's comfortable, like, before she moves on with anything. So I think that helps a lot.
She's always she's always open to help. Her classroom's always open, especially during lunch, and I come in like a lot. So, I try to. But yeah, she's always open.
She always gives opportunities like to come in like for extra help, like she after school tutoring and lunch tutoring, and like in class if we need help, like she'll explain it. I think just Miss Burrow, Miss Burrow just helps us like all understand it. Like this math class has just like been the best like for our high school like years, because like she really like wants us to get it, and like she's like always like on our side for us to learn.
Yeah. So what are some ways you know that she's on your side, helping you get it?
Well, she always asks us like what we need in order. Like she makes sure that we makes sure that we have what we need, and she always asks us like what we need in order to like understand, and that's really helpful.
She's really understanding. Like if like Brittany said, if we need something, she'll like make sure to assist us like with worksheets or like time. Yeah.
It feels like I'm not one of like 200 students, you know, like if I ever do need personal help or one-on-one help with whatever we're doing in class, she's always available.
I noticed you were taking a group test today, and some math teachers, when they hear about that, because I worked with Ms. Burrows for a few years before she got here, and I watched her get teachers to do that, try and get teachers to do that. And of course the bell happened.
I'll write passes.
Can you
So-
say that again, Wendy? Because
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Can you just tell me about the group test experience? How does that help you as a student?
For me, a group test helps a lot because I'm not a good test taker like on my own, and it gives me like an opportunity to actually talk with my peers and really understand what I'm doing, even like if I'm struggling, you know, even if like the tests don't count as much, it still helps because when you're ready before you take our individual, it gives me a better understanding of what we're going to do. So.
Great. Thank you. Topco, is there anything else? We don't want to make your whole class late, Ms. Burrows.
No.
It's a 30 seconds, yeah.
No, I think
Thank you all so much.
I think first off is that you have to build kind of a common understanding of what that means. And one of the ways that we did that is we described what our ideal state would be. If we had everything that we needed, everything that was in place that could possibly be in place for students, what would it look like? Right? And so you're starting with that kind of looks likes and sound likes, but then you also go into, so what are the habits of mind? What's our disposition? How do we lean into this? How do we work together to help build this culture for ourselves? And then how do we then replicate that for our students? And so one of those pieces that we really talked about is valuing each other and what each person brings to the team. And so that's what I try to narrate as I lead, is that I see the beauty of each person that I work with, and that it's through all of that beauty that we're able to build something wonderful. And if I can lead that way, and that's how I talk and how I interact with my staff, then by virtue of that, that's how they're going to talk and that's how they're going to interact with their children. And then you lift those practices up in a way that values the people that are demonstrating those practices and also encourages the people that have not maybe seen that in themselves yet. So a lot of it is seeing things in people that maybe they don't even see in themselves yet. And then each time you get a glimpse of it, highlight it. Be very specific in the feedback that you give so that they know, whether it's just a verbal, whether it's a hug, it's a high five, it's a text, it's something so that they know kind of what you're looking for and what you've noticed, and you've seen that beauty in them as a leader. Before I could even really do that, I had to do some soul searching myself as an individual and find out where I was in relationship to that. So meaning, what do I want? What kind of community, what kind of climate do I want to work in as an individual? And then I had to really look in the mirror and say, so are my actions working towards that? Or are some of my actions working against that? And then the hard part is to be vulnerable and to admit and be honest and to speak from, this is what I was trying to accomplish, but I realized that maybe the steps I was taking or the words that I used didn't get me there. So therefore I apologize and I want to do better. So I feel like the more people know where I'm coming from and where I'm leading from, and when I'm willing to admit mistakes and share what I've learned from working with them and working with others, it's creating a climate and a culture where that can continue to happen. So it's not that one person is the keeper of all the knowledge, or one person knows everything that needs to be done. It's that we learn from each other and from the experiences that we have together and the experiences that we have in life. And that's how we're able to really positively shape school culture.
Thank you.
That was your
good.
dinner break entertainment. Now we'll start Madam President.
And you have 3 minutes to give us an opening.
Okay, this is the second portion of the LCAP workshop today. We spent the day starting at noon going deep dives and extensive presentations on each of the LCAP goal areas, and featured some of the work that we'll be doing next year. And now for this evening's portion, we're going to have sort of a 3-minute commercial on each of the areas that you heard from this afternoon, and then there'll be time for public comment to talk about each of those areas. So with that, we'll turn it over. We have different representatives from each area to give you the 3-minute commercial, starting with Goal 1, closing the achievement gap with high expectations for all, and the 2 areas that we focused on this were mathematics and grading and students with disabilities. So summarized your beautiful presentation from earlier today for the group today.
It'll be hard to ensure that the slides are following my 3 minutes, but
we decided to not do visuals because
Perfect.
we wanted to. Melissa was she got
Yeah,
those videos
it's-
going.
it'll
and
be hard.
So we're going to
Okay.
go without the visuals, but do the verbal summary.
perfect. Our data shows that we have a math emergency, and we have a plan to address it. We're not doing this work alone. We're partnering with our math expert, Patrick Callahan, and we're collaborating with principals and teacher leaders to develop and pilot a phenomenal math course that we're calling Enhanced Mathematics. Our theory of action is that in order to significantly strengthen math instruction across the district, our approach has to be comprehensive. A lot of times we think we're just going to focus on one component of the instructional core. For example, this year we'll focus on guaranteed viable curriculum. Next year we'll focus on instructional practices. The following year we'll focus on assessment and grading. That's not an approach that works. We want to go deeply and we want to go purposefully. So we've developed and designed a course that takes into consideration course sequence, the sequence of courses that students will take in their high school experience, that takes in consideration guaranteed viable curriculum that gives opportunities for students to think critically and engage in authentic assessments. It's also going to include work around instructional practices that are valid, reliable, and have proven successful, that allow students to explain their thinking and think deeply about mathematics to gain conceptual knowledge. And finally, it includes assessment and grading. Our focus is going to be to teach the teachers who pilot the course to grade based on proficiency and ensure that students are given multiple opportunities to master standards. I don't know if that was 3 minutes, it was probably less, but.
That's fine, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we
Sarah?
know mine will be less. So students with disabilities, we went over the historical data about students in the past, in 1970, being excluded and how we've worked hard for them to have opportunities and access similar to their non-disabled peers, which led to our vision of all schools will recognize that students with disabilities are general ed students first, and they will create a culture of belonging for them by providing educational access and meaningful opportunities equal to those of their non-disabled peers. We talked about the ideal state and that it goes along with the Marzano's work in high reliability schools with a focus on safe, collaborative, inclusive cultures that have strong Tier 1 instruction designed with all learners and learning styles in mind, and a guaranteed and viable curriculum that all students have access to. We had a quote from a student that inspired us: "Tough times never last, but tough people always do." And that we're launching our work in a manner that we typically do with the Summer Institute, which is similar to our summer principal learnings, with an objective to widen the sphere of success to deepen the learning for all of our students. We'll be designing environments of instruction that meets our students, understanding and leveraging the strengths to enhance Tier 1 instruction, recognizing the different models and benefits of co-teaching, student supports with intensive needs at their home school, and build leadership expectations for supporting students with disability. And we're working with 2 consultants, Dr. Jackie Thousand and Dr. Rich Villa, authors and consultants and professors. We've identified 6 lighthouse schools, 3 elementary, 2 middle, and 1 high in each area that will be model schools to demonstrate the practices that we have outlaid before us, that students will be able to go to and see how it's happening and where kids are able to be successful. One of our highlights is the integrated student success teams, where we will work with schools to look at each student who's outside of the sphere of success, to problem solve, design reading and social emotional interventions, to implement and monitor these interventions, and revise as needed to integrate students back in the sphere of success with a coherent process, provide learning for staff, develop interventions, and this will engage more students into the sphere, have fewer referrals for special ed, have fewer students placed in specialized settings, and decrease number of student behavioral referrals. We also talked about our coaching and support, that we're building capacity teams of 6 program managers and 12 resource teachers to help writing and implementing those high quality IEPs, designing effective service delivery models at every school site, and teaching quality instructional practices.
Thank you. We have speakers.
Yes, we have several speakers on Goal 1, and they're continuing to sign up. We'll start with Moira Albritton.
Could you just call them all and just have them come forward?
I would say 2 minutes each, because there's several. Moira
How many do you
Albritton,
have total?
Dan Niamanga, Amy Redding, Melissa Agudilo, Susie Reed, Blake Hofstede, and that may be it.
2 minutes each.
And that's it for Goal 1.
Thank you. Come forward if your name was called.
This is me as me, not as a CAC person. But anyway, it would be really helpful if when we're doing LCAP and considering what it's going to take to close the achievement gap, if we would have a district-wide minimum threshold for a suite of technology and software, such as licensing for certain interventions so that sites did not have to make the decision for a child whether to fund it rather than just having it available for all children. An example would be IXL math.
Thank you. Next. Dan.
Good evening. I'm Dan Yamang with San Diego Crawford, and I just want to say that the LCAP document that we already have, that we are finishing the year, is a very perfect document because we came as a community and asked you to consider our recommendations, and you did all of them. The classification, going to the DSC, forming a SIFE committee to look at the new arrival students, and you did. I think the missing component is the implementation part of it, and also the alignment of the district site and the site, the district and the site, the school site, and the departments. And one thing you'll find out is people are talking and saying different things, and what is in the LCAP is actually a wonderful document. It's saying everything that if you are an alien coming from somewhere, from space, coming and reading it, you'll be like, this San Diego Unified is the best place to be. But is that reflective of what we get from the result from our children? And when I say that in the morning, we had a very good presentation. And when you look at that data, it shows the schools that are at the bottom are the schools that are Crawford, Hoover, Lincoln. And these schools have something in common, which means the way to approach to educate these kids might be different from the way we are used to educating kids in the overall school district. And so that's why as a community we're inviting you to, we look at it differently. These classes are different, these communities are different. We need to reinvent ways of how we approach them. And we send you some recommendations from this year's LCAP to look at, and we invite you. As a board, you approve it, but the big job that remains is going to the sites and see how it works. And the data does not lie. When you tell this to a community that your schools every year is the last one, it's not doing as per district average or the state average, is the last one. It's not a good story. So we need to start somewhere to look at it differently in addressing the needs of these kids. Yes.
Thank you, Dan. Next. Is that Maury?
Good evening. I'm Amy Redding. I'm the chair of the Kearney Neighborhood Schools. The data that or the comments that you see in front of you today were collected at 3 separate data points. One of them was at the Linda Vista Ed Educational Conference, which we thank you for your support, and I'll say that again later. And also the LCAP input session that we had at the cluster meeting, as well as the Linda Vista Town Council invited me to come to their educational subcommittee where I met with parents and we talked about the situation of the budget and how the LCAP works, and I got feedback from them as well. So that's all included in here. For closing the achievement gap with high expectations for all, we need more counselors, smaller class sizes, more supports for struggling students. We need improved access to tutoring provided by quality staffing, whether from San Diego Unified or from the outside. Schools need to follow the IEPs. We continue to need supports for our English learner students. They bring a lot of money into this district because the state recognizes that they need support. We need classes for parents to understand curriculum, what happens in the classroom, and how parents can support their kids in and out of the classroom. We are seriously questioning the quality of credit recovery. It is a disservice to the value of the diploma for all students, and it is a huge burden for the students and the teachers, or the students in credit recovery, for courses in a sequence such as math and Spanish.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Melissa Agadello. I'm the principal of the San Diego Met High School located on Mesa College. And I wanted to take just a second to advocate for the atypical schools, all of the high schools that are atypical that found ourselves on CSI this year. And I wanted to just say a word about that. I wanted to open by thanking Ron Rohde, Genevieve Clark, and Sophia Frieri for really helping us dig deep into our data to understand why we were in this situation, as the San Diego Met is one of those schools. And I wanted to call out and specifically name that small atypical schools like Marcy Newdon, like the San Diego Met, like Alba, like Garfield, and like all of the small schools that found ourselves on CSI, we are designed to be schools that are building relationships for students who need something different in education. And so as prioritizing relationships first, as encouraging students to find their place within the educational community, sometimes those single categories that end up applying to us that put us in these situations may not be reflective of the real value of the full program that we are offering. For the San Diego Met, one of the things I discovered with the support of Ron Rohde and Genevieve Clark was that of the numerous different categories that came into college and career readiness, the San Diego Met only had one that applied to us. So while the design of the CSI platform is well intended for a comprehensive high school to include a number of different data points, because we are so small and because we serve such a crucial population that really needs the kind of small relationship building, big picture style of education that we are learning and growing and building every single day, we unfortunately end up on this list because only one data point applies to us. And that data point doesn't necessarily reflect the real lovely power and value of the kind of relationships we're growing. I wish each of you could have been at our graduation ceremony and seen the value of the kinds of students that we have speaking, students who saw the death of parents this year and who didn't get straight A's in school and weren't valedictorians, but they were still highly valued. And so CSI, unfortunately, doesn't always reflect who we are as small schools. So I just wanted to take a second to put that out there and to advocate for my brothers and sisters who are working in the small school environment.
Thank
you so much.
And we acknowledged earlier that there were some schools that, they're small schools and really they're not the focus of our attention. We thank you for the service that you're providing.
Good evening, board and superintendent and staff. My name is Susie. I'm the chair of the District Advisory Council. As far as Goal 1 is concerned, I think the concern is that we're meeting all the students' needs, and so I think I saw a big sign back there from our GATE DAC chair that said that same thing. So the big concern is through the DAC, and what we're hearing is that we really do need ELSTs at every site. It seems to be that ever since we lost them, we've just seen more issues around our English language learners and not as much improvements as we'd like to. And I know that with the changes that we're not seeing the results that we want to see. So we're getting a lot of feedback at sites or from sites, particularly around ELSTs and English language learning. SSEs also need training when they take over the legal role of an ELAC, which we have happen often because there isn't enough parent engagement around at schools around the ELAC. SSEs have to take over that legal role and they have no idea what they're doing. So that needs to come from OLA. That also needs to come through the family engagement department, but a little more attention needs to be put in that arena, and it just needs to be more specific. Specific goals are in Action 1. A lot of the actions seem a little more vague and don't necessarily, we can't tell what schools they apply to or whether they apply to all schools. Like the coaching cycles were really only applying to Title I schools. Other schools showed up saying, hey, how come we can't get coaching cycles at our school? And so there's a real big question as to whether or not we are meeting all students with some of these actions. Also, a cluster-wide approach may be more ideal than a district-wide approach. Clusters can, as the community, they can support. I also wanted to echo the last speaker, support for atypical schools and more counselors. Our atypical schools didn't have an area soup this year.
Thank you. The next speaker, please.
Hi there, good evening. My name is Blake Hofstad with the Linda Vista Town Council. First of all, I'd just like to appreciate y'all for staying late tonight for folks who have to work during the day and can't show up in the middle of the day. It's a step in the right direction to make stuff like this more accessible. Couple points that I'd like to make. A lot of our parents in Linda Vista were really surprised to learn about how the local control funding formula works, that money is poured into districts. There's a supplemental and a concentrated category. And they were even more surprised to learn that that money doesn't necessarily follow the students who are the reason why that money comes into the district. So if we're going to close the achievement gap, I really think that we should be creative about making sure that the money that the district receives to serve English language learners and students, qualifying for free and reduced lunch actually follows those students and makes it into those school sites. Otherwise, I don't see how we can close that achievement gap, because that's going to require significant funding. I want to share a really beautiful example of the work that was done by a Linda Vista elementary school teacher who I work at a preschool in Linda Vista. We have a kindergarten open house every year for families to get familiar with their different options in the neighborhood. And I had to kick him out of the school because he was talking with 2 Spanish-speaking parents about Mesa College. I was like, great, that's beautiful. You can continue this conversation in the parking lot, but we got to close. We're closed now. But it's happening on an individual level, and parents they can't chart that pathway. They don't know what their child's education pathway looks like in San Diego Unified from day one. We get really positive feedback about the PK program from parents in middle school, and we've had parents say that would be really beautiful if we had that information from day one. We have a lot of parents in our neighborhood who don't understand social promotion. They were born and they were educated in countries where social promotion is not a thing. So when their child continues to go up to 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade every year, they're like, great, my child is learning. Their child gets to high school and they're like, wait a second, how is my child reading at a 3rd grade level? Why are they allowed to continue to advance grades? That doesn't make sense to me. I thought they were at grade level. So parent education from the get-go, from the jump, and making sure that money follows the students who are the reason why we get the money in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, sharing with us. That ends the speakers for this segment. Thank you. Let's move on to Goal 4, Positive School Environment, Climate, and Culture, Academics Through Agency, New Framework.
All right. Nice to see you again. Hello. So during your dinner break, you got a little bit of some more taste of this goal with our student and teacher and leadership perspectives on how they're moving this work forward and the bright spots that are some of the bright spots in our district. So as we said, is that to really get at equity and excellence, we have to look at the whole child. And when we looked at the data tells us there's some emergencies that need to be looked at, whether it's our California Healthy Kids Survey data that shows that our secondary and elementary students don't feel like they have a caring adult that they can turn to when in times of need, or our referral data when too many students are being removed out of the classroom for and not getting Tier 1 instruction. So we want to, and we've been doing things separately, where we're not paying attention to the whole child as we've rolled out curriculum in the past. So, for example, taking a look at social emotional learning and teaching that as a separate content area, and not embedding it and integrating it into all content areas. So, how do we humanize this work and help adults know how to respond when students are misbehaving? Well, we looked across the nation and we saw that there are many frameworks that are being utilized. And what that told us right away was that there wasn't a singular framework being adopted, and there was a lot of different language and terms being used for social emotional learning, such as non-cognitive variables, soft skills, 21st century skills, and so on. So in working with our partners at Harvard, we've discovered that there's over 200 different terms being used across the nation. So they took it upon themselves to create a singular framework and really take a look at both the social emotional learning and the cognitive learning, and how do you integrate and embed that into a singular framework, and and then take it to a scale into a district, which we believe has not occurred yet in the nation and will be the first in the nation to take that on, moving into our 2019-2020 school year. So they held us look at these two challenges, right? Teaching the whole child and teaching all children. And what we've done in the past is when we consider teaching the whole child, we look at the aspects of the social emotional learning and we teach to that with a curriculum, with a time of the day and whatnot. When we teach all children, we sometimes then don't pay attention to the culture, beliefs, strengths of an individual, and they have to assimilate to the culture that's being established. So when you do that, you marginalize and disempower students. So we have to do a deeper dive then into what we call the ecosystem of a classroom, because behavior is just a result of students that feel stressed and bring trauma into the classroom. So how an adult responds in that moment is an indication on, are they going to exacerbate that situation or are they going to buffer that situation? And it's built on adults knowing our students well by name, by strength, and by need, knowing the cultures that they bring, and building that relational trust, and developing lesson plans that help support their diverse and uniqueness. So when we looked at the frameworks that Harvard developed, they have a framework that looks at 5 areas of what we need to pay attention to in a Tier 1 instruction. Those areas, I don't have my glasses on me right now, sorry, I'm going fast. Our cognitive skills, thank you. Emotional skills, there they are. There they are. Usually it's like something like this, right? Where are my glasses at? Cognitive, emotional, social, attitudes and beliefs, and character and values. So those are the 5 frameworks that we're going to be looking in and when we are assessing our schools, assessing our classrooms, and teaching into ways to integrate those skills into every content area across our classrooms. The how component is really looking at a framework of the adults that need to learn through 3 areas of what we call critical self-awareness, high-quality relationships, and a socio-ecological approach. And we're gonna roll this out like we did with the 4 learning cycles years back, but with these 3 learning cycles this year, there'll be an integrated professional learning approach across our system with those 3 areas in mind. The 3 questions that are going to drive our learning will be learning cycle 1, how do we foster high quality relationships for children, youth, and adults so they feel safe, wanted, and successful. Learning cycle 2 will be how do we cultivate individual and collective critical self-awareness that enables us to challenge inequities and promote well-being. And learning cycle 3 will be how do we recognize, incorporate, and validate lived experiences of children, youth, adults, and communities in order to build a culture of empowerment and inclusiveness. That incorporates those 3 foundational areas of the framework of critical self-awareness, high-quality relationships, and socio-ecological approach. We're then leaning on the works of Zaretta Hammond, John Hattie, and Yvette Jackson. And we're looking at what are the elements in a classroom and how do we break that down to what it actually looks like in practice and what does it look like for the learner and how do we teach into that. So that's the big work ahead, is the implementation side of this and the exciting work, and we're going to stay in strategic partnership with our Harvard experts in the field, and I think we're all really excited about moving this forward. It really takes us in the right direction where we, from a national scale, we just haven't seen anyone go. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
And we have 3 speakers, 3 minutes each.
Yes, for goal 4, we have Moira Albritton, Mary Ann Hawk, and Amy Redding.
Good evening. Once again, I'm Marianne Hawk. I'm the chair of the GATE DAC. I'm here to bring comments from the committee on Goal 4, Positive School Environment. First off, the GATE DAC fully endorses the supporting the whole child and social emotional learning, which is good for all students, including gifted students. I want to impress upon you that GATE is an equity issue, overlooking or dismissing or underserving the special needs and learning differences of gifted students, especially those who are twice exceptional or 3 times exceptional, is not equitable. All students includes GATE students. I also want to comment that gifted students may be disproportionately referred for disciplinary action if their differences are being misunderstood, or if they're not identified as gifted to begin with and people don't know what's going on with them, if their special needs are not being met by the school. Many twice exceptional students spend an inordinate amount of time in the principal's office, and that's not where they belong. I wanted to comment that gifted students may be vulnerable to bullying because of their differences and their emotional sensitivity. Their giftedness is part of who they are as a whole, and it should not be forgotten. And finally, I wanted to bring some attention to our gifted LGBTQIA students. They are often overlooked, they may be unidentified, and their needs warrant special attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Amy Redding, Kearney Neighborhood Schools Chair for Positive School Environment, Climate, and Culture. Safety is the top priority for all families in our cluster. Our Kearney community has been plagued this year with shootings, lockdowns, bullying, unsafe passageways to and from school. We need San Diego Unified to be a leader in the community. We need you to use your political power at the local and state level to build neighborhoods worthy of our children. This burden cannot be on just admin alone. They also have the job of focusing on education, which is their goal. The IEP meetings are in the very least uncomfortable, if not intimidating for most parents. We need to do a better job of engaging parents in the IEP process. Everyone needs training to facilitate a better IEP process. Parents, teachers, staff, admin, and not the same training, but role-specific training. Our elementary schools are starving for more resources, such as arts, athletics, clubs, mental health and behavior supports. Resources seem focused solely on high school students. Problems don't start in high school. We need to continue to train all staff concerning developing and maintaining a family-oriented school. It is just the simple, non-agenda driven things like seeing staff out in the mornings and after school, coffee with the principal, school family activities 1 day a week during the first 30 minutes of school, and the list could go on and on. Parent surveys should be taken at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year to track improvement. Survey data should be widely distributed and discussed at the school site. We need to cluster itinerant support staff so they remain within the cluster of schools, as there are unique needs and programs where having the same person support is ideal. Counseling and guidance services need to be at all schools full-time for their work to be meaningful. Staff needs to be able to lock classrooms from the inside in case of lockdown or emergency. Some school sites have gotten the easy solution of the bumpers installed on doors, but this still isn't at all sites. We really need in our cluster to have safety be one of the top focuses.
Thank you. Next.
Susie Reed, DAC Chair, and also representing the Point Loma community. As far as positive school or positive climate and school culture are concerned, the parent survey metrics need to be a little more robust than just the return rate. Parents are really, their perception is really everything. It's not the child who decides what school to go to, it's the parent who decides what school their child is going to. And so in order for us to really get to the bottom of why, we have people leaving our neighborhood schools, that might be a really good source of information. Parent surveys, I'm going to echo what Amy said, need to be done at the beginning of the school year and at the end of the school year. And we also need to have more widely released information. SSCs should be looking at that as soon as they get it, as soon as it comes to our district offices and not hiding in a Google document somewhere. Restorative justice needs more funding, more people, and more professional development for all, and it doesn't need to be just on a voluntary basis. I especially believe, and I believe that a lot of people believe that principals particularly need to have restorative justice training, especially if we are a social justice district. We also need more counselors because principals are not going to be able to do all that on their own. And I know we have volunteers. We had a volunteer in Point Loma doing it for a long time, and then she couldn't do it anymore, so we're missing that. It's really about the social emotional impact. It needs to be integrated into all the PDs, maybe a little icebreaker at the beginning that has to do with restorative justice. Absenteeism is also a huge issue, and it's at the core of why kids, or why we're losing kids, and parents and parent surveys, parent perception, we can really get a good idea of how to tackle that as well. Counseling pilots, we're paying through part of one out of Title I, but we have had no data. We're going into the third year of a counseling pilot without any data. And we can't determine whether or not it's sustainable unless we have data. Students who are part of the pilots, we'd love to hear from them, or not hear from them, but teachers who are part of the pilots, counselors that are part of the pilots, we'd love to hear what they have to say as far as the progress, and the DAC is a good place to provide that as a forum, so I'd like to see more of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just the tail end of the input collected at the Community Advisory Committee. With regard to LCAP Goal 4, get existing construction approved, AC installed, overdue repair tickets. It was commented that we need more library days, that we have, that's a really important place for students to have as an option, and that more and more libraries are just locked unless they have the right person in there. And then finally, as myself, input is that counselors and counseling guidance folks, especially in the high schools, need to have responsibility for all students, including students with disabilities. Too often we are allocating transition goals to case managers, and it's like, who's placing students in school? Who's helping them get into post-secondary education? It's our guidance counselors. Why are we asking somebody who that is not their forte to do this for our most difficult place? Thank you.
Thank you. That ends the public testimony for that segment. Goal 2, access to broad and challenging curriculum. New English learner course, literacy advancement summary.
Of my partners in this work, and we thought that we wanted to hear her voice, so she's doing her Winston 3-minute version of our presentation.
Winston's back.
Winston's back.
So was last year's LCAP.
So, and I'm also a member of the integrated team working on this course, and as of July 1st, the chair of the ICC and managing the course of study again. So, off we go. So, before we start, I know there are people in the room who were here earlier today, but not everyone was. So before I start sharing the details of the course, I want to put the course into the context of a student. And we don't have our slides up, but imagine our student Lucia. She attends school regularly. She has dreams of going to college. She is socially connected at school, and she has many friends. Outside of school, outside of the classroom, she is frequently seen talking animatedly with her friends in social conversations. But inside of the classroom, she's often quiet and rarely engages in classroom talk. She has completed her ELD course sequence, but she has not yet been reclassified because she has not yet developed academic language proficiency. So as we started to think about students like Lucia and what they needed next, we started to think about how could we take those strengths and interests that we know our adolescents have and that we see in our observations of them outside of class into the classroom by redesigning and rethinking a course, not just adopting a new text or program, but paying attention to what our students need and integrating our social emotional learning and our academics to make a difference for our ELD students. This new course is being designed for approximately 1,500 middle school students and just under 1,500 high school students who have completed their ELD course sequence but have not yet been reclassified. The data shows us that the course we have now is not working. We have just shy of 3,000 students who would be eligible for this new course. And we have a program in place in that course, and it isn't working for these kids. So we need to do something different, hence the new course. So what's different about this course? There are 3 things that are markedly different about this course. It's going to be student-centered and will combine academics and agency so that we can build that confidence and competence and independence that we see in these kids in settings outside of school when they're using English for social purposes. It is going to be based on 4 sets of standards, actually: ELA, ELD, the ISTE standards for instructional technology, and the social justice standards. And through those standards, the students will be provided with multiple opportunities for communication with a variety of audiences for authentic purposes and on topics that matter to them and have meaning for them. The third component of this course is that it's going to have technology embedded throughout for engagement, for assessment, and for expression of learning. The course itself is organized into 6 units based on the social justice standards. All of the students will be maintaining an electronic portfolio of their work and will prepare a TED Talk as the culminating project. By the end of this class, the students will have read texts and watched videos on identity, community, and diversity. They will have reflected in quick writes, engaged in conversations, and shared in digital discussion boards. These are all things that our adolescents are doing outside of school as part of their social network. We want to bring that into the classroom. They will have written online children's books for their feeder schools. They will have published public service announcements for their peers to learn from, and they will have developed their final project, their TED Talk. We firmly believe that this course can help to unlock the genius of each and every one of our long-term English learners and will have a direct impact on their academic progress and ultimately their success beyond school.
Thank you. And we have how many speakers?
Yes, we have 3 speakers on Goal 2, Marianne Hawk, Amy Redding, and Susie Reed.
Amy Redding, Kearney Neighborhood Chair for Access to a Broad and Challenging Curriculum. We need more linked learning, especially in regards to math, science, and coding. And next one is near and dear to my heart. Due to a limited number of fast track spots afforded to Kearney High School, there are many high-achieving students that are not getting access to this critical program that serves in the place of IEP. If our kids that qualify to go into an AP class or to have access to college, this is an equity issue. And students that need this should be getting this. We should not be confined to 200 spots to juniors and seniors. And once you don't get in this program, you don't get in this program for 2 years. So we need to take a look at our MOU and how we are making sure students that actually need this are getting into this program. We need more field trips at all levels that link to learning and careers. Many of the components of STEAM are not available or accessible to all schools in our cluster. We would like not just the schools with the grants to be able to have access to this, because we want it to be strong STEAM through all of our cluster. We are loving the one-to-one devices at our school sites. There needs to be more resources and educational opportunities in and out of school in partnership with San Diego Unified and other community groups. Education must exist outside of the school day, but must be embedded in our homes and our communities. And the Kearney cluster requests more arts for all of our schools.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. Susie Reed, DAC Chair. From the DAC side, as far as broad and challenging curriculum, we talk about summer school a lot at the DAC, and there is a good portion of Title I money that goes towards summer school. It was raised to, I believe, 1.7 million this year, and it is still not enough. There are still kids on the wait list, but those are just for making up their classes. The word is escaping me at the moment, but it needs to be for 5th graders and 8th graders too. We have 8th grader D's and F lists galore and issues trying to get them to academic success, and so we're not expecting very much in 9th grade if we're not working to try to help them in 8th grade. So a summer school for 8th graders would be highly recommended, and that comes, I think we've been saying that at the DAC for years. The other is my Point Loma cluster hat. Point Loma High School teacher recently put out a letter because of some curriculum changes, or at least some potential changes. They were recently informed as a forced change to the progression of sciences at Point Loma High. The teachers there are deeply disappointed that many years of work at Point Loma High to create options in the progression of sciences is being being dismissed as unimportant. We found out a long time ago that one size fits all is not a good fit for high school science progression. They are using a physics first approach, and it's based on high achieving students with a strong background in algebra. They found that some freshmen didn't progress or didn't possess those skills, and they were not capable of being successful in a physics course, and a change was needed. Realizing that a lack of math skills was the problem, they decided as a group that it would serve the population if they offered different options. It sounds as though these options are being removed. A lot of parents have expressed concern about this. It seems that the school tends to know their community really well. The school knows their students, and I think we need to listen to our teachers. They have a collective 11 teachers with 216 years of combined science teaching, with 143 of those years spent at Point Loma High. So I believe these teachers know what they're doing. So as far as science curriculum, let's please pay attention to a letter that was sent to all of you board trustees, as well as you, Superintendent Martin, from Dr. Brian Benz at Point Loma High. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Mary Ann Hawk, Chair of the GATE DAC. I want to go back to the original comment I started off with earlier today, that all includes gifted students, and please don't forget them. I wanted to kind of run back to a comment that we talked about earlier today, that statement about all children are gifted. I actually very strongly disagree with that. Not all children are gifted. All children have gifts, yes, but not all children are gifted. And if you think about it this way, you would never say, all children have autism, so they'll be fine. All children have ADHD, so they'll be fine. All children have learning disabilities, so they'll be fine. You'd never discuss it that way, so you shouldn't talk about GATE that way either. The characteristics of giftedness are very complex. They're very significant in terms of learning and schooling, so please don't talk about it in that way. I wanted to make a comment about the math because I kind of missed being able to do that in the first session, but I wanted to reiterate that a lot of the GATE parents are very upset about this talk about changing math, and I just wanted to reiterate that to try to help with that, the GATE DAC has created a math working group, and we had this room full of parents at our last meeting who were all riled up about concerns that advanced math was going to be eliminated and that math was going to be detract. There are a lot of GATE students and seminar students who are, they're in 4th grade doing 10th grade math, or they're in middle school doing college level math. And so they want to make sure that you don't forget about those students while you're thinking about math. So if you would please work with our group. We weren't even involved in the first iteration of the math listening tour. I had to contact the district and ask what that was about and ask for our committee to have a presentation made I can help you with communication with the GATE students so they don't get all freaked out about it, but we need to understand what you're doing. So we're happy to work with you. Please contact me, and we'll work together to get that information out. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes public testimony. Goal 3, quality leadership. Thank you for that summary. Quality leadership, teaching and learning, CSI schools.
Hear me? Okay, good. One of the things that we're excited about as we forecast next year is our work around LCAP Goal 3, Quality Leadership, Teaching and Learning, is the work that we're going to continue to do around moving students into the sphere of success and making sure that each and every one of our schools is highly reliable. As you know, each of our schools has a strategic plan that's designed to move students into the sphere of success. And you also know that each school is at a different place in that. Most recently, 14 of our schools have been identified as schools who are eligible for comprehensive support and improvement. And as you know, these schools have not yet demonstrated the kind of improvement that is expected in the areas of either ELA, math, suspension, chronic absenteeism, graduation rates, or college and career readiness. And so what we're excited about is the plan that we have designed that will, we believe, make sure that these schools who are currently in CSI will become highly reliable. We are sure that the plan we put in place will have great results in terms of moving more kids in the sphere of success. And so we're going to give quick highlights of that plan.
So our plan has 2 components. I'll talk about the first component, the universal supports, and Monica will talk about the individualized school supports. So our universal supports really focus on increasing high quality leadership and high quality teaching and learning. That is the ultimate goal. There are four universal supports. The first one is we are going to support the work with Marzano. We're excited about continuing the partnership to ensure that we have high reliability schools. We're going to focus on creating those safe, inclusive classroom cultures across our system with a focus also on effective teaching, which is level 2. So our goal is to move our schools from CSI to RHS schools, high reliability schools. The second support that that all schools in CSI will receive is student-centered coaching cycles. We've seen great data move the dial for our students in our coaching cycles this year, and we're excited to see that happening for our schools next year in ELA, mathematics, and in our early literacy language acquisition coaching cycles at the elementary and middle school levels. We're excited about the partner principal coaching aspect. It's another layer of support. I didn't mention that the Marzano Consulting also has associates that will work with our principals, but we will also have the expertise of seated principals, our very own principals, as a sounding board, as a thought partner, to be side by side in the work in helping to strengthen outcomes for students. Chronic attendance inquiry, that is our other universal support that we are going to be engaged in. And what that means is we're going to be taking a deep dive into our data, really looking at what are the patterns and trends and what are the root causes as to why students are in a situation that they are chronically absent. And once we can identify that, then we can begin to think about what are the best practices that we can use and replicate across our whole district so that our students are here ready to learn and that we're beginning to meet their needs. And again, that goes back to having that safe, collaborative, inclusive culture and for students to be in classrooms where their needs are truly being met academically and socially. So now I'm going to turn it over to Monica, who's going to talk about the individualized supports for students.
Thank you. So in addition to the universal supports that Kimmy described, each CSI school has also been allocated funds on a per pupil allocation to allow them to purchase supports based on their individual dashboard needs. So the sites have the discretion to use this funding to address the specific needs on the site dashboard. So a quick example of that is that if a dashboard indicates that there's a high suspension rate at the school site can use the funds to target this very particular need. They can utilize this funding to offer training for positive behavior intervention systems, to train staff to create classrooms where children want to be every day. They can also use this funding perhaps to provide additional counseling, hourly support. They can also enhance their home visit program. They have the flexibility to utilize these funds based on their California dashboard need. So the principals have been given a menu of support that the district is offering, and there's a CSI support fair that's coming up where the principals will have an opportunity to match the supports with their needs. So each CSI principal will also work with their with their area superintendent to finalize this plan. And this comprehensive support and improvement plan and budget will be part of the site's single plan for student achievement. So as you can see, this was a collaborative effort, this universal and differentiated support model, and that it was a partnership between the schools and their stakeholders and the central office, with the goal to move our schools from the current designation of CSI to high reliability schools.
Thank you. And we have two?
You have two speakers.
Two speakers.
On Goal 3, Amy Redding and Susie Reed.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Amy Redding, Kearney Cluster Schools, for quality leadership, teaching, and learning. Professional development needs to be provided to teachers in all subject areas. For example, there has been no district professional development for world language teachers for at least the past 3 years. We need more quality staff development and more involvement from the military, industry, and college students. We need more quality teachers with more cohesion between units. We need more opportunities for collaboration through an ERO style. We need assistance with classroom management and Tier 1 instruction. And we need more collaboration between teachers and parents. It would be great to train parents as teachers so that education continues outside the classroom. And I'm super excited for the CSI. I love that there's a district component and that there's a personalized site-specific program, particularly for Linda Vista Elementary that's in my cluster. And I'm looking forward to see how all of that works out and how it all plays out. So keep me up to date.
Thank you.
Oh, boy, Richard, I'm really glad you asked that because I have no idea. Can somebody else answer that question? I'm sure this comment came from teachers, and some of this stuff I just read off and hope none of you pick out my ignorance.
It's the electronic registration online to register for staff, for district professional development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Susie Reed, once again, DAC Chair. Again, coming from SSCs and around Title II money that was used for professional development this year, as well as the Educator Effectiveness Grant, which has sunsetted, I suppose, or I guess. Teachers and school sites don't actually have a lot of professional development money left or in their budget, so I'm very curious about how all the professional development will be paid for. And because the LCAP draft is not released with any figures, it is very hard to provide feedback on that because if I can see whether or not the money is increased or decreased or whether, because if the actions and goals say that we're going to increase professional development, I hope that the money is there to support that because I think that professional development is extremely important, especially around social emotional learning, restorative practices, and obviously things that have been mentioned before, OLA. As far as OLA and English language learners is cluster level support is really something that I'd like to see more of that's mentioned in the LCAP, but we don't really see a lot of cluster support. I know that Point Loma was trying to do an ELAC, a cluster-wide ELAC, and just because of site support or the lack of site support, that wasn't really, it wasn't very successful. Also, as far as professional development and coaching cycles or learning cycles go, most of the parents, and I would also like to say teachers that come to the DAC, are all very interested in how schools are selected for that process. Most of the presentations and the presenters were not necessarily able to give us a really specific answer, but I know that it's around the area superintendent and principal need, but how exactly are we targeting? We have 22 high need schools, but how are we identifying all of those other schools? And board members, are you aware of which schools in your area have been targeted? The parent collaboration and training, again, I'm echoing what Amy said, but as far as around having parents know what's happening in the school around professional development. I think parents really want to know what the teachers are learning. I think it'll make it a little easier for parents to be understanding when it comes to having substitutes in the classroom, that their teachers are out there trying to become better, their principals are out there trying to become better, but parents don't really know that that's happening. So there needs to be more of a kind of an information session, maybe some of those e-blasts that are coming out of the Office of Secondary Schools, because those seem to be relatively effective in getting attention. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Let us move on to, thank you ladies for the summary. Let's move on to Goal 5, Family and Community Engagement with highly regarded neighborhood schools. On the Logan Memorial Complex vision for the work and specific plans for family engagement.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is our pleasure to speak today about a new method of engaging the community. This is a program that involves the Logan K-8 school, but also it's partnering up with Perkins Elementary to some extent. We began this process by involving the district leadership team, teachers, and parents at Logan Memorial to identify the root causes contributing to the achievement gap forming for children before they enter preschool at Logan Memorial. Their discussions, particularly with parents, led to the formulation of the following problem of practice. Sorry if I read that. Logan parents face realities that Logan parents face realities that require the executive function and emotional regulation that adults use to manage life, work, and parenting effectively, such as planning, focus, self-control, awareness, and flexibility to deal with the adverse experiences of poverty and racism. Consequently, parents may not focus their attention on developing relationships with their infant children that will enable the children to develop their own executive function necessary to experience success in pre-K to 12.
Good evening, and if you recall, the problem of practice and the theory of action really allowed for the team to take a deep dive into the latest research, and we came to the conclusion that developing the executive function in parents was actually going to have a very impactful effect on the students themselves by developing their own executive function as well. And so therefore, by focusing on the parents at the prenatal stage, we would then allow to build a very successful pathway for their students in the academics and in life itself. We also then talked about the development of a coaching model in which we had a pod, and we developed a pilot for that during the 2018-19 school year. And we are really excited about working with the Promise Neighborhood Grant so that we can expand on that model during the 2019-2020, that sounds so strange, 2020 school year as well, so that we are able to service more parents from Logan Memorial Complex through this coaching structure.
Got it. We're going to jump to what I think is the most important, probably, part of our presentation, and that's the voice of Eleanor, one of our parents in our community. She's actually a volunteer at our school who found herself being brought in as part of our Logan family right away. And Eleanor says, the immunity to change process has brought out things that I did not know about myself and my behaviors. It is great to have peers and pods to support you as you develop. I'm very excited for this work and have great faith in it. I'm excited to see how it continues to benefit Logan parents.
And we would just like to leave you with the last thought that we see parents like Eleanor really being the future leaders and the lead coaches in that coaching structure. And so we look forward to continuing the work at Logan Memorial Complex so that we can develop future leaders that will then continue with future generations of Logan parents. Thank you.
Thank you. I like the model where we now have parents as the center focus there rather than, right. That's very good. I think we'll see some different results. Speakers.
Yes, we have 6 speakers on Goal 5. Mary Ann Hawk, Dan Niamanga, Amy Redding, Yolanda Flores, Blake Hofstede, and Susie Reed.
Hello, I'm Marianne Hawk, speaking as chair of the GATE DAC on Goal 5, Family and Community Engagement. A couple of additional comments from the committee. One is about the choice program and choice deadline. It's really a nightmare for GATE parents, the timing, when the choice deadline was moved back to October instead of the spring, because a lot of families, their GATE test results are not until late in the year. And so they almost have to like guess a year ahead if they think their child might be testing into a GATE program if they decide that they want to change schools. So that's a real logistical nightmare for GATE families. It just turns the whole process on its end. Second comment has to do with communication through the websites. So the GATE website has some items on it that have been translated into Spanish, and we're very grateful that the Spanish translator comes to our meetings. But we'd like to see more of the information about GATE translated. And the district GATE website really needs an update. It's out of date, really out of date, and parents have a terrible time finding information on it. We'd also like to see each of the school sites have their own GATE tab that doesn't just refer back to the district, but also provides information for GATE families at their school. Thank you.
Next.
Hi, I'm Daniel Mangutse San Diego at Crawford, and for those in the instructional cabinet already heard about the family dinner analogy, and Teresa can say that the way we look at education in our community is about the family dinner. We disagree. We disagree on how much salt to put in it, how much time you spend in boiling the water and making the food, but we'll sit down and eat that dinner together. And we'll do that again and again every day. And this is how we look at it. Everybody has something they bring to the table. It might not be perfect, but it adds on to the dinner that we are all eating together. And when we do that, we look at education that way, the way we are, as a community, we are calling us to look at that, we'll be able to support more kids. Because if you're a teacher and you have the profession, if I'm a parent, I know my kid. And if you're a community member, you know the community. And if you're the principal, you know the school community. But everybody brings something. And so for our Crawford and Hoover cluster, we already gave you the recommendation from last year and this year too. We're looking at that invitation to that family dinner so that we can build this community through the disagreement that we had. Teresa knows this, I would disagree, but tomorrow when she comes back, we sit down and have a dinner, have a meal together and talk about what can we do to make it better next time. And so we also, we proposed last year to look at the Power School so that it incorporates some of the languages that our communities, our parents do speak. Up to now, it's still doesn't do that. And so that makes it difficult for the school site to be able to reach out to these parents that that are missing out because the power school does not support their language. And also that also affects the early warning system that is very important in making sure that the students that have D's and F that are not doing good are reached out, and the community is ready to support in the language aspect that is missing. But the school site is unable to reach out because the power school does not support the languages their parents do speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy Redding, Kearney Neighborhood Schools. Goal 5, family and community engagement with highly regarded neighborhood schools. We have to be sure that we have interpretation at every meeting with parents, PTA, cluster, school site council. I'm super excited that we have interpretation tonight because we do have a parent from Linda Vista Elementary here, or from the Linda Vista community. And so it's great that she can participate in the meeting like the rest of us. Too many sites are forcing parents to accommodate the school working schedule. As a result, a huge burden is placed on our already stretched thin parents that work low-wage jobs with little flexibility. Low-income families are forced to forego wages. If this is to continue to be the norm in San Diego Unified, we need to have a pilot program of paying parents for their time. If we cannot do this, then parents' schedules need to be accommodated for meetings and conferences. We need workshops that support parent learning. Workshops should include all facets of parent involvement, from help at home to advocacy at the site and the district level, SSC, DAC, CAC, etc. We also need to provide better access to families. Perhaps I need to even look at my own committee, adjust meeting times to accommodate parents. We need to provide more opportunities for parents to give input in meaningful ways and in front of the decision makers. So thank you for this 6 to 8 meeting tonight to make sure that parents that are working could get here and stand in front of all the players that make all these decisions for their children that affect all their lives. So kudos. We need to provide more opportunities for parents to give input in meaningful ways. Oh, did I already say that? Oh, yes, I did. We will continue to build relationships ourselves with our community partners, such as Voices for Children and the Linda Vista Town Council. Thank you.
Next, please.
Hi again, my name is Blake Hofstad again with the Linda Vista Town Council. So to echo a couple of things that we hear a lot in Linda Vista, one again is interpretation. I think a lot of times we think of interpretation, we think of Spanish first and foremost. That's obviously the biggest need that we have. But in Linda Vista, we have over 20 native languages spoken. Spanish being one of them, but about half of our adults in Linda Vista who are monolingual in a language other than English speak Spanish. That's 50% of languages that are often not covered in our meetings. So for example, at a parent meeting we had last month, we have about 80 to 100 parents in Linda Vista who are monolingual in Mixteco. And we have trilingual people in Linda Vista who speak English, Spanish, and Mixteco. And if we want to have equity and inclusion to be a model for the district, I think we do, can we empower some of these parents who are multilingual to be the interpreters? Not only are they interpreting for people who are currently have zero access to what's going on at their school, but we're also putting money into our community members who are low income, who are working families. And that can also serve almost as a promotora model so that they can be doing outreach to other parents about what's going on in these schools. It serves a dual purpose. I talk about paying parents all day long because a lot of times when people show up to meetings like this, oftentimes it's in a professional capacity. Parents, as Amy said, parents often volunteer at an economic loss to their family. That's not something that many parents in Linda Vista can afford. And so paying parents, if we know that parent participation in their children's education has a positive impact on this kid's education, then isn't that an investment that we're willing to make? It's important. And parents don't know what happens at their school site council. They don't know that these things exist. It makes me sad when I look at the school site council budget for a school like Montgomery Middle School and I see $1,200 allocated for the whole year for parent engagement. And I see one parent who sits on the school site council, and the chair of the school site council, his kids are 40 years old, and he has no kids in the school anymore. And so really, if we're talking about equity, we need to be talking about putting money into the pockets of parents who are volunteering and giving their time and their perspective at a loss.
Thank you. Next, please.
Susie Reed, DAC Chair. My concern around Goal 5, as is the concern of the District Advisory Executive Team, is that there's no parent survey data connected to, there's no metrics. The metrics are listed all for the student surveys, and they're listed out by grade level. But this goal doesn't even have the return rate as a metric, and it's family and community engagement. So I think that we definitely need to make sure that the parent survey and specific items out of the parent survey are listed as metrics, because that's really the best way to gauge how our parents feel and how we're really engaging them specifically. I'm really excited that parent advisory chairs this year, we've been working with Teresa Laskowski and Pamela King and trying to work together to try to figure out how we can increase parent engagement and what some of the barriers are. And I think we've had some good meetings. I'm looking forward to a few more. I'd love to continue meeting with guidance and counseling as well on the parent surveys and how we can get those out, because I think we stalled a little bit. There's a mention in Goal 5 around the LCAP review and feedback that needs to happen at the district and then come down to the site level. The only time it's really happening at the district is here, and it's the end of the school year. And so we've made it a point to bring it to the DAC, but I had to do that. There's nobody saying, hey, would you like some information about the LCAP? So our advisories boards are being left kind of out in the dark and having to fend for themselves when it comes to getting information on the LCAP. The SSCs, we need more training. The SSC metric is not reliable. Principals are not turning in rosters on time, so we really are not getting the engagement we want to see there. And I'm again going to echo the previous speakers about translation. SSC meetings should have translation. That should have, I mean, that can come out of your parent engagement budget. It can come out of different budgets. So engagement, especially
Thank you.
around translation. Thank you.
And that ends that segment. Goal 6, well-orchestrated district-wide support services and community.
Student site and district safety is at the core of achieving excellence and equity. We know that safe schools have healthy cultures with an engaged community around safety, belonging, and inclusiveness for all members. When the board directed $15 million, thankfully, we have a wise chief of staff who said, you know, we need to think about how we're doing this, and we can't do this in isolation. And so, Dan, she heard you, and we had a family dinner. So we invited a cross-section of district staff to come together and think about how we would spend this money and future money. And so we came up with a very clear connection to high reliability systems, where safe, collaborative, inclusive communities are, as you heard earlier, embedded in effective teaching, guaranteed viable curriculum, and the other two steps in Marzano's work. So we realize that our schools are safe. We realize that there are parts that each school have implemented. However, we recognize that we needed to bring together a collective view of this. All around this notion of school and district climates focused on relationships, environments, safety as a component, and ultimately teaching and learning. So we developed a strong vision for thinking about this current plan and future plans. We have an action plan with goals embedded as well as components to implement, and very thorough. When we're thinking about safety, it's inclusion. It is certainly social emotional learning and academics. And we have a process for assessing our current reality with least interruption to school sites. So using current district information, but also focused on aligning with school safety teams. The building blocks include a welcoming and nurturing environment, being responsive, but also being preventive. We need to make sure we pay attention to staffing and equipment and making sure that everyone is prepared, as well as district communication. Along with these components, we have an assessment, as I mentioned, to focus on how we prioritize, and based on those priorities, we go into implementation phase. We believe it'll take 5 to 6 years to implement the full plan, and our work ahead is to make sure that we finalize our plan, make sure we distribute it, make sure that we're working with the district design team and working with PPO, physical plant operations, facilities planning and construction, to make sure that we're implementing and we're on schedule with whole site modernizations, things of that nature. And then moving into how do we communicate. So designing placards to communicate to news media outlets quickly, to parents quickly, so that they know what's happening, and also to work on a district-wide communication system where that we can inform those in the classroom, students, teachers, as well as district personnel on how to respond effectively and efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. And now the public
Yes,
testimony.
four speakers on Goal 6, Moira Alberton, Amy Redding,
Please
Blake
come.
Hofstede, and Susie Reed.
Thank you. Please come.
Good evening for the final goal, Goal 6. The communications seems to be, at least that's what seems to be the main kind of, when people think of Goal 6, it's the communications, even though it's all services combined. But as far as communications are concerned, the SSCs, we pushed for SSC websites to be consistent with consistent information. We've actually worked this year to make the DAC website a little more resourceful with links to various things that are challenging to find throughout the district's website. But a GATE tab, an SSC tab. The SSCs are federally required groups. They all should be consistent. They all should be very similar. They're all required the same things. The only thing that makes it different is the population and the people that make up the group. But really, that's something that would be beneficial. It would be helpful. And we have a lot of parents who don't have a lot of information, but if they go to the website, they know that they could find it there. The district website is a little too challenging, but if they could have it specifically on their school website. We also have one of the metrics is that we have rosters posted online. I don't know that actually happens. So I think that needs to be examined. Texting, there's been a lot of requests for texts. A lot of people are not on computers. We have a lot of people who can't afford computers, but people have cell phones. They're monthly plans, there's, pay as you go, but mobile phones are something that most people have. So if they can be mobile, made to be fabulous looking on a mobile, or just mobile accessible, I think the texting, that's a great idea. More people are going to be apt to respond or pay attention to texts than they might be to emails. We've had a lot of requests for that in Point Loma specifically. And cluster communication. Pair up with communities like Main Street associations, chambers, and town councils.
Thank you.
Amy Redding, Kearney Schools. We are disconnected from our families that do not have electronic access. This limits their knowledge of day-to-day activities as well as knowledge of school lockdowns and other serious matters. So now I'm going to say I agree with Susie as far as using the texting. I think that would be much more accessible for our parents. We need better supports for mental health and a more robust system to be sure families are connected with services outside of the school purview. We love that 100% of our students are being offered free meals, but there is always a request every year for better lunches. The cluster is pleased with the easy system for requesting repairs for student and teacher devices. And we in the cluster love local events at our school sites. And in this case, this year, the Linda Vista Educational Conference was fabulous. And thank you, Daniel, for the idea. Just take it from Crawford and Hoover. We have to thank the huge support of Area Superintendent Kimmy Lochtefeld, the FACE department of Teresa and Pamela and Gerardo, food services, Montgomery Middle School, interpretation, and two of our amazing STEAM teachers. One is Pedro Figueroa over at Linda Vista Elementary, and also Mike Sinise over at Montgomery Middle School. Much of the feedback in my public testimony today was collected at the Linda Vista Educational Conference. We are already working hard to plan for next year's conference on February 1st, 2020. Blake and I are looking forward to all your wonderful support that you gave last year and have it be repeated next year. As a cluster, we will be building on our recent parent engagement successes and the inroads that we made this year in getting more parents coming to events and giving their input. We could not have done it without your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, Blake Hofstad, Linda Vista Town Council. So two things when it comes to support services that I think are really important. Working at a preschool, I see many families choose non-district options for their children because of the absence of before and after school programs. Every single year that siphons, in the tiny little circle that I work in, dozens of families. It's really a challenge for single working families to, as you know, kindergarten, it's very hard to get into prime time. And I don't know what that looks like. I know that funding is limited through the state for ACEs, but I really think there needs to be a push from the district to recognize just how many families leave the district because they just they can't do it. They can't afford to pay a babysitter to come pick up their kids 5 days a week. It's not sustainable. So before and after school is big. I wish there was a better way to get information about school choice out to families, especially with the really early deadline. That, again, is a reason why parents are leaving the district, because if they don't want to go to their neighborhood school for whatever reason, and they miss that school choice deadline, they're not left with another district option. I know it's challenging to kind of fit everything. I can't imagine how hectic the school choice process is, but that early deadline, especially for first-time parents to the district, a lot of them don't know about it. A lot of them don't know and don't apply and wind up outside of the district when it's time to go, and then stay outside of the district. And then finally, I was trying to get Jamil to come up here and testify. Jamil, we were talking earlier, and echoes the same thing. He's like, my number one thing, I just want to eat food that I like at school, you know? So I think for all of us, I remember when I stopped feeling ownership over my education in public school. And I think for kids to have a say about what they're eating it would be a really fun way to sort of integrate ownership over their education in terms of other support services that the district can offer. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Superintendent, I don't know if we know that choice deadline yet, but if we know it now, let's start advertising it right now for next year. You know it already? What is it? Okay, so we can start putting it out there right now for next year. Thank you.
I'm back to mention, I didn't give positive comment that special education has continued to work to do more proactive, I would call them corrective action proposals, instead of waiting for families to have to go through the burdensome and often overwhelming complaint filing. So I wanted to just make sure that that was noted and appreciated. Second, though, on the flip side, communications for the individual teams, of which we have like 15,000 different little configurations of IEP teams, we need to have maybe a quick working document that just identifies some best practices just to hopefully jumpstart more effective communications between families and parents. Families and the school district. And then lastly, I regret to say that I have not, in the last several years, heard a parent report a positive outcome from dealing with quality assurance. So I feel like that might be something for you all to maybe think about as we go forward, just that when someone has a problem, I really want to be able to give them a place to go, and it's demoralizing for me to not have that fly out of my lips. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you for that input. That ends that segment of that. Thank you, Lamont. And Superintendent, you got the last remarks on these?
Sharon, could I just I know we've been taking notes on all of the public comments. So I wonder if when the LCAP is brought forward for us to vote on, there could be some summary maybe from the superintendent about some of the ideas. I mean, there were a range of ideas, right? And some were big, but some seem pretty practical. You know, the texting, mechanisms, the increased translation on first drafts of IEPs. I mean, there seems to be some things that we may even be ready, in this year's LCAP to incorporate. So to the extent that we could get that report back, here are the suggestions that we heard, here are some suggestions that we think we could act on now, and here's some that may take, more longer term.
Yeah, typically when we're in the review process of the LCAP, we get this is one place where we get feedback, and it's unpublished online. And when I do the first read and the second read, we will show red line versions of what's been changed. And when I present, I typically summarize and lift up some highlights and get it from multiple sources. So I will continue that practice, and we can always take into consideration the things that are yes, do now, yes, consider later, and make it clear. And that we started that practice a couple years ago, making it clear, because we made changes and people didn't know what they were and they couldn't see the changes. So that's something we'll incorporate. And that was actually what I was going to say in my closing comments. So you prompted me perfectly. Appreciate that.
Are you finished? That was it?
Sure.
End of the
No. I'll wrap up the day by saying, as you saw today, we spotlighted specific things that we're doing and looking forward to implementing in next year in the year 3 of the LCAP. And year 3 doesn't mean there hasn't been 5 years leading up to this year. The things that we decide to focus on, expand, or stop doing are all based on the action, services, metrics, and results of what we've seen year over year. And so we lifted up some practices today to go deeper with, like I said, and some things to continue doing. I think Dr. Whitehurst-Payne's word of the day, I probably have a word of the day for each of you, but yeah, you want to know what yours was? Scale. How do we scale it? And that has been a theme. How do we scale things that are working and doing it quickly? And I always say, if money were no object, even though we have some really powerful solutions, even if we had all the money in the world, you don't just flip a switch and put it everywhere, because preconditions are important. You need to make sure it's the right thing at the right time for certain school sites, and some sites and clusters are focused on certain things one year, and something that's working in another cluster isn't ready to be imported to a different cluster just because it's good and it's working. So it's always about strategic. You don't want to import something. When we talk about, you want to take something to scale, replicate it so it's sustainable. It's always about strategic decisions to do that. So it's frustrating sometimes to see, oh my gosh, we have the answer. Why don't we drop that in on everybody? Sometimes we aren't replicating and taking to scale because there really isn't money to do it. And I could have a whole conversation about the governor's budget and where we are and what the decisions have been even this weekend to properly fund and adequately fund our schools. So there might be solutions that we're not scaling because we don't have adequate funding. And then there are solutions that even with adequate funding, we wouldn't scale yet because it's not the right time. So it's always about those decision making. We're going to continue to advocate for full and fair funding, and this last governor's proposal doesn't look like it's going all the way, but we're going to keep our advocacy in place. And what I know is that the work that we've done here over the last 5 years and with this local control and the accountability plan that goes with it is that when money does come in, we know what works, we know what's working, and we know what we're ready to scale, and we know what preconditions look like, so that when we scale something, it's taking it to a place that is ready for that kind of change. Then we look at places that aren't ready, and we say, well, then why aren't they ready? What are the preconditions that need to be put in place, and how do we support that? And the same theory of action that we've used for the last several years, we're going to continue to use, which is finding those spotlights, things that work, and taking them to scale across the district. We got to identify a problem, and then identify something that's going to work, put into place, and then record and put the accountability metrics alongside it so we know whether it's working or not.
Thank you, Superintendent. And with that, our next meeting, our regular meeting, is on June 18th. Not even a week away. It's on Tuesday, June 18th. Thank you. To all of you who came out, thank you. Okay.